And now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports Podcast. I am here tonight with our usual co-host, Carlos Rueda. Carlos, tell me, please, how are you doing this Wednesday night?
Yeah, James, I'm doing well. It's another chilly one up here in DC and this cold first day of February. Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm going home this weekend for my mom's 50th birthday. Really excited about that. It'll give me a chance to be back home in the Bay Area in Tampa. Take a quick drive by the new Rowdies training complex, see what's going on down there. But I'm excited, James. I mean, this is a really fun time of year. This is around the time where we can start almost talking about those preseason games on the horizon, where we can start dreaming a bit, right? We can start looking at the Rowdies content they're putting out on their social media. It's so fun. Preseason started officially a couple days ago, if I'm not mistaken, and it's just been so cool to see the pictures and then the video and the little bit of content coming out from Rowdy social media. It's just got me really excited, and I honestly just cannot wait for the season to start. So, how about you, James? What's going on down there?
Yeah, it's not cold down here. You might have guessed. It's actually in the 80s. So that's what we're dealing with. But I guess that's pretty good weather if you're trying to get back into shape for the upcoming season, right? That makes sense, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I miss it.
Yeah, I kind of miss the cold a little bit, but like I said, it's good for the Rowdies. They are starting to work out. If you have not seen them on Twitter, you can definitely see some preseason imagery, and it's pretty cool to see who's there and who's not, because that's a fun little game. Now, we have been talking, Carlos, for the last couple of episodes about championship transfers, USL championship, that is. And I was thinking, as much as we love doing that, the Rowdies haven't put out any new news, at least this week, or any news that we missed last week because of when we recorded. So why don't we look at the world beyond the rather small world that we inhabit here in American D2 soccer? Let's look at the transfer window that just closed over in Europe, where most of the news in the soccer world is made. There is obviously a lot to go on with Ronaldo, with, Chelsea buying every player that they can, a lot of World Cup stars on the move. So, Carlos, let's jump in here with the first segment that we've got lined up. It is for the World Cup stars who moved clubs in this transfer window in January. So the first one, I think, is a pretty easy one. It's one that a lot of people know about. It is Ronaldo having moved from Man United to the Saudi Arabian League for some reason. Carlos, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I think there were a lot of reasons, and they're all green and they're all money. I mean, if you're getting paid that much, James, I don't really care what league you're in. I think the temptation is going to be there to go. I think everybody saw it as kind of a surprise. I feel like the Saudi Arabian League, a few of the Middle Eastern leagues are becoming more and more popular for, I guess, kind of what the MLS, what MLS has been seen as in recent years, kind of like a retirement league for some, big time European stars. We've seen that recently. There's a lot of big name players that have gone out, Saudi Arabia to Qatar, et cetera. So I guess not totally unsurprising if you've been following that trend recently. But that being said, it is kind of surprising because it seems like this is a player, obviously, is one of the best of all time, who had a lot left to give. So going to the Saudi Arabian League seems like somewhat of a, big downgrade for his type of quality. That being said, I did see that his team, Al Nassr, just lost in who was it? Like their Open Cup style cup league. I really don't know. I can't say I'm too fully up to date with the Saudi Arabian League, but it was big news on Twitter that they fell 2-1, kind of as big favorites, as I would imagine you would be with Ronaldo on your team in Saudi Arabia. So things are not going as smoothly for him as everybody might have thought they would go in Saudi Arabia. He's also getting a lot of flack from fans down there. It's not just everybody blindly following him or anything. So it's a really interesting development, really interesting to keep up with. And the matches, surprisingly, honestly, I have to say, have been much more competitive than you'd imagine, James. So I'd keep up with that league if you're interested in any, random soccer. The games that Al Nassr plays in might not be as one-sided as everybody thought.
Yeah, no, and if you do want to keep up with them, I noticed this on the ESPN FC website. That is ESPN soccer side. They moved the Saudi Arabian. I don't know if it's the Stars League or the Premier League, whatever they call it. They moved it way up in their list of games. So at the top, they
Yeah.
usually have the Premier League, then like the Bundesliga, Italian Serie A, and then down and down until they get, like that almost no one watches. Saudi Arabian League jumped way up on that list, and they can't even put the Canadian Premier League on their scores page. So there's, I guess, if you are Ronaldo, you have a lot of star power, right? That does make sense,
Oh yeah.
of course.
Oh yeah. And to clarify really quickly, James,
Carlos, there is another story.
To go back and clarify really quickly on the Saudi Arabian game that I was talking about, it was the Saudi Arabian Super Cup, by the way, that they lost 3-1 to against Al Ittihad as big favorites. So that was the tournament, or sorry, the cup that they lost to recently. It was January 26th, 3-1 loss that I guess nobody saw coming. So keep up with that. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, so that is the story for Ronaldo. Unfortunately, there is another story that we have to cover here, Carlos. Another World Cup star has left his club in Mexico, and there are worse reasons for this one. So Dani Alves, Brazilian star, formerly of Barcelona, as well as several other clubs, including Juventus, he was with a team in Mexico, and he ultimately has left that team now because he is facing legal problems in Spain after he very likely assaulted a woman at a nightclub there. So, Carlos, I was, I kind of fell in love with the Barcelona team that Dani Alves was a part of, and seeing this happen is, it's always awful every time it happens because it means that somebody was assaulted and they had to deal with that. But
right,
from the stupid perspective, I guess, of a fan of the person that was out there, that just sucks to see. And all I can say at this point is I hope that justice occurs, of course.
Yeah. These incidents are always really tough as, I don't know. I mean, people like Dani Alves, people of such huge name and quality, are such big idols for a lot of people. I mean, people that are practically superheroes, for people who grew up watching that Barca team and whatnot. So, I think unfortunately, a lot of people's idol just kind of crumbled in front of their eyes right now, in recent days. So it's very unfortunate. And like you said, I hope justice gets served. It's crazy. 39 years old, I guess, definitely on the back end of his career at this point. But it is crazy to see kind of his name and his whole reputation go down in shambles in I guess one really, really, really bad night for him.
Yeah, I don't know. We will have to see how it continues to play out, but everything obviously is very unfortunate. Now, there's no way to move on from that easily, but let's try and do that, Carlos. Let's move from what is a very bad situation to something that should be upbeat. I want to talk next about an American who is on the move, and that is Weston McKennie. He has left Juventus on loan to go to Carlos. Let me know if you prefer this one or the other one, but I kind of like Major Leeds Soccer as opposed to Leeds United States. Okay. I feel like the first one is better than Leeds United States because it's not quite. I don't know. Which one do you like?
I like the first one. It flows off the tongue better. Major League Soccer. There's so much American influence now over there. It's really, really funny. I on the way to Qatar for the World Cup, actually, I ran into somebody who from England who's a huge Leeds fan, and he started jokingly thanking me. And I'm like, what for? And he goes, oh, for all the Americans on the team. And I'm like, oh, well, you're welcome. It's kind of wild. It's really, really cool to see Weston McKennie. I think he's going to thrive at Leeds.
I think that, based on all the pictures and the videos that have already been put out, he's just happy to be with the friends that he has from the national team. He and Tyler Adams have effectively grown up together. If you are, if you follow the national team, you'll note all the times that they post pictures of those two from when they were very young teenagers. So it's pretty cool that they are now playing at the same club. I feel like they're almost brothers, and it's Aaron Johnson is there, but then Jesse Marsh is the guy at the helm. I think that's just going to do very good things for all of them.
Yeah, fully agree.
All right. Well, the next move in our list is a player that actually tormented the Americans. Well, I guess he didn't. The next guy after him did, but this guy was part of the team for the Netherlands who did torment the United States in the World Cup. Wout Weghorst, one of their strikers, has gone on loan to Man United from second division side Burnley. Now, Carlos, I don't know how much you remember this guy from outside of the World Cup. I really didn't see a ton of him personally, but I do remember the 2 goals that he scored against Argentina in the quarterfinals, where Argentina then had to beat them on penalties. That was something to behold because I was hoping that Argentina would win. But yeah, that's an interesting signing. I know that they're just looking for somebody probably to help replace Ronaldo a little bit. And I wonder if they might have found, at least a tall man who can jump.
Yeah, it is really interesting to see somebody get loaned from a lower division up to a higher division. I feel like that happens pretty rarely, especially, a loan from Burnley, a second division side currently too. Not just a first division side, but one of the first division sides, right? One of the Premier League teams in Man United. Always cool to see kind of something like that. Pretty rarely happen, but good for him. Kind of unfortunate that I don't know. I have bad memories now of the Netherlands against Ecuador and the U.S. But yeah, really interesting storyline. Got to be really cool to keep up with. So we'll be sure to keep up with him. And I guess his loan spell at Manchester United. You can't really ask for a better loan spot than that, right?
Right. Yeah. It is pretty wild to think, going up a level. That it's true that does not happen a lot. I didn't even consider that part of it. But the next player on this list is somebody who was absolutely a direct part of the reason that the United States ended up going out. I don't know if he scored against Ecuador too, Carlos, but Memphis Depay was a huge thorn in our sides, and he is on the move. He scored against many teams in the league in Spain for Barcelona, but now he has left Barcelona to join Atletico Madrid, and this is a permanent move. So in the end, we could be seeing him score against Barcelona now. And I'm interested to see, how that works out for him, because he's had a kind of a journeyman career. He was also at Man United, if I'm not mistaken, for a little while. And he's a very talented player, but he never just seems to be all of that, he never seems to be all that wanted wherever he goes.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I feel like I've seen his name around for a while. And I remember my first exposure with him was in one of the FIFA games. And he was this really high pace, high energy guy that you could put in forward and just control the game. But like you said, I feel like he's one of those players that has a lot of talent to give and maybe just never really lived up to the hype wherever he went. I don't know. It is kind of sad because it seems like a player that, he's a really big name, right? I feel like he's one of the most popular or well-known players currently from the Netherlands, if not the most well-known player from the Netherlands, other than, I guess, Virgil van Dijk. So it is really interesting, and I hope he kind of finds his footing again soon, or finds his footing at all. Maybe Atletico would be a good spot for him. I like Atletico Madrid, so I hope they do well soon too. They're always kind of nipping away at this top 2 team, so maybe this is that signing to push them over the edge, right?
Yeah, they can be a stable club, but like you said, it is always in that third position that they are stabilized. So
Right.
I'm not sure really what it'll take to put them over the top, but yeah, it will definitely be interesting to see how it works out for him. I would love to, I would love to see, I would love to see some change, I guess, up at the top in Spain. That would be interesting to see Real Madrid maybe suffer a little bit.
Yeah, I thought that would happen a lot more after Ronaldo left and Messi left. I felt like that kind of started to switch up the, hegemony of Barcelona and Real Madrid at the top, constantly controlling that. And for a little bit, it seemed like it was. I feel like both those teams had like pretty down seasons recently. But all of a sudden, they're the 2 biggest teams in the world for a reason, right? They can kind of just buy whoever they want and kind of remake a team out of nothing. So I feel like it's going to take a lot for that to happen. But if there's a team that can, break down that glass wall, I guess, or That's not the right saying. I'm just saying things now. If there's a team that can break through that, barrier of Barcelona and Real Madrid, it's definitely Atletico Madrid. They've had their big name strikers in the past. They've had Griezmann and whatnot. And Griezmann was a legend for them, right? Maybe Depay is that next Griezmann, but maybe, I don't know, maybe with a little more energy to push them over the edge. We'll have to see.
Yeah, like you said, we will have to see, and I will be following it along for the rest of the season. That much I know. So, the next one, Carlos, the next couple, I want to run through a little quickly because I feel like these are guys that people won't know as much, but I still felt like they deserved mention here. So, Antoine Semenyo, one of the Ghanaian strikers at the World Cup, he has jumped up a level to join Bournemouth in the EPL. He did similar to Wout Weghorst, that he has jumped up that level, but he did not go on loan. His was a permanent move. So congratulations to him on the jump up in career and probably salary as well. The next one was Geronimo Rulli. I believe it's Rushi, but my Argentinian Spanish isn't that great, so I'm just guessing at that. He left Villarreal to join Ajax in the Dutch league for roughly 8 million euros, it was reported. So congratulations to him on another step up after having won the World Cup and probably getting a similar bump in his salary. The last two, Carlos, these ones I think might be a little more well-known to people. Morocco were the darlings of the World Cup. And, that was obviously for very good reason. So their two starting central midfielders, Salim Amala and Azzedine Ounahi, both of those guys were pretty much, unknowns, I would say, before the World Cup. Azzedine Ounahi especially, he plays for a team that is hovering around the bottom of the French league. And I don't know how many people actually get to watch the French league anyway, because it's behind several paywalls, it seems. But these guys both impressed so much over the course of their World Cup run through the semifinals, when they became the first African team to get that far. And on the back of that run, now both of them have made a move. So Salim Amala went to Real Valladolid in Spain. He was playing in the Belgian league, so that is a step up, although Real Valladolid do have a lot of room to grow because they are the last team outside of the relegation zone in Spain. So hopefully he can keep them up, I suppose. I'm guessing that is the thinking there. And the last one, Azzedine Ounahi, has moved from that club in France near the bottom to one of the best clubs in France, and certainly one of the most well-paying clubs in France, Marseille. So I just wanted to take a moment and say congratulations to both of them. I think they both deserve it. And Azzedine Ounahi was one of those guys that literally nobody knew about going into the World Cup, and he exploded on that stage. You kind of love to see that, Carlos. And it's also very rare, in 2022, that somebody's going to be an unknown and make it all the way to the semifinals. Who could have picked that? Who could have guessed that?
Yeah, right. It was just wild. I feel like there's no other word to describe it other than wild, but that was objectively, I think. Well, I mean, obviously Messi winning the World Cup, that would have to be a close second to be the main story, right? Out of that. So really, really wild stuff. It was so fun to watch too. I can't even lie.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody loves an underdog, as anyone who is watching the Wrexham documentary will point out. But that'll do it for the World Cup stars. And before we move on to our next segment here, which will probably take a little bit longer, I do want to say liking and subscribing is free. But if you think you might need some new clothes coming up, you can support this podcast a little bit more by heading over to shop.rblrsports.com and checking out all the stuff that we've got going on there. Several designs that we have lined up for all the teams that we cover. There will be a link in the description and a promo code for you to get 10% off. That is COYR. So do please check that out and see if there's anything that might be sprucing up your wardrobe as well. Now, Carlos, let's talk about the big clubs in the transfer window, because I think that as much as everybody can talk about Ronaldo for ages, and everybody can talk about a couple of other players, maybe Dani Alves or Weston McKennie, but maybe not so much the other ones. Yeah. Everybody can talk about the big clubs. That much I do know. So Let's start with one of the, they are the biggest spending club. Chelsea, like I said, have bought almost every player available on the transfer market. And I'm going to go through them now, Carlos, and then we will discuss. So in order, they bought Benoit Badiashile from Monaco, Joao Felix on loan from Atletico Madrid with no option to buy. Very weird stuff. Andre from Santos in Brazil. Then they brought an Noni Madueke, an English player who was actually at PSV. They brought in Mikhailo Mudryk, this Ukrainian winger that Arsenal wanted, but I guess Chelsea said that they were going to pay double what Arsenal was, and they got his contract instead. They bought Malo Gusto, a right back from Lyon in France, and they sent him out on loan back to Lyon. And then their last player that they signed at the very end of the transfer window, like literally the last hour, was World Cup winner Enzo Fernandez, and that is the guy that they wanted all along. So, Carlos, there's a lot to go over. Who do you want to start with there?
There's a lot there. There's a lot. The first name, like the most exciting name for me personally, just having watched the World Cup and having that fresh in my mind, is obviously Enzo. And but I think another name that I'm really excited to see is Joao Felix. I think he's probably one of the more like exciting, but I guess less hyped up players out there. I feel like he's one of those players that has so much potential. And it's really fun to watch him play. So I have a personal bias towards him, but I guess it's easy to have a bias towards the attacking players, right?
Yeah, obviously people are going to want to see, whoever can go out there and try and score some goals. That's going to be the most important thing in a sport like soccer where goals come at a premium. And I don't know what the statistic is, but, whatever you spend on a striker that scores that many goals, and they are earning you a potential point. So it's very important.
For sure.
I'm also interested personally in just seeing how the young kids do. There were Malo Gusto, like I said, a right back from Lyon in France. They have loaned him back out to Lyon, so we won't see him immediately, but he is a top talent, and if you could sign him, you should. The other guy was Andre from Santos in Brazil, but they are not going to play very much very quickly, but it's just cool to see if these guys ultimately do make it. I feel like that's kind of a fun part of soccer, is just seeing, which prospects turn out and which ultimately do not.
Yeah, for sure. And Chelsea, what I've seen is also, I think they either missed out or they just didn't follow through, or they're waiting for the summer window. The players fresh in my mind from the Ecuadorian national team as well have kind of been in the mix of a lot of the Premier League news. Piero Hincapié, the left back / center back, depending on the day, might have missed out on Chelsea. But I know now Tottenham is also in the mix for him as well for the summer. But for whatever reason, no deal went through in this window. So we'll have to see what happens in the summer, because lots of moves can be made over this time period from now until then. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, and another Ecuadorian player who was linked with a team was Moises Caicedo at Brighton. He was linked very heavily with Arsenal, and even went to social media to request that they allow him to transfer there, but that did not happen. Ultimately, Arsenal signed a couple of other players. They signed 3 players actually to fill what were pretty much 3 holes in their lineup. They got a center back, Jakub Kiwior, who is Polish, a winger, Leandro Trossard, who they did sign from Brighton, and then Jorginho, the center midfielder from Chelsea, who is actually going to take up the role that I'm pretty sure they wanted Moises Caicedo to fill. So kind of unfortunate in terms of, the Ecuadorian player in the mix here. But yeah, that is really good business for Arsenal, and it's probably going to help them shore up what they're trying to go and win the title with.
Yeah, and that's not to say that Arsenal didn't throw considerable money towards Brighton's way, right? I think the last number that they threw out was like 70 million, right? That would have by far broken the record for the largest transfer fee for an Ecuadorian ever, which I think at this moment is actually Moises Caicedo. But that being said, it is crazy that he did not end up there. Brighton really, really, really held on to him, and understandably so, right? He's a really good talent. But it is unfortunate for, I think, both Arsenal and himself. And I think it might be a little awkward for him going back to training in these next couple days, right? So it's going to be a little weird for him, I'm sure. I think he's actually, if I'm not mistaken, he just recently got picked up by the same agency that works with Piero Incapie. So that might have been what kind of, I don't know, might have been the advice from them to kind of push for that transfer himself through social media and kind of try and force the hand politely. But Brighton did not go for it. And who knows? Who knows? Maybe that third transfer offer from Arsenal might have done the trick. But I know Chelsea was also looking into him. And then we'll have to see what happens in the future. And again, lots of stuff can happen from now until the summer. But that being said, Arsenal picked up a ton of really good talent. That's not Moises Caicedo, including Trossard, who's really, really fun to watch from Brighton. Belgian, if I'm not mistaken. Also had a couple appearances at the World Cup. And he's really, 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 really good. So they are picking up some great, great players here. And Brighton is making a lot of money developing players really, really rapidly. They've kind of built up a reputation for that recently. It's really, really cool to see. I don't know. I am kind of struck, like insanely taken aback by the fact that they passed up on 70 million more, right? So we'll have to see if it pays off for them. I'm sure it'll pay off for Arsenal. They are in great shape right now, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Brighton are definitely getting onto the buy low, sell high train at the moment. But yeah, I guess Arsenal will probably not be the club that Moises Caicedo ultimately ends up at. We do know that over the summer, it's very likely he will end up leaving Brighton, though, based on everything that we've seen. I think Jorginho still has it in him to, keep going a little bit past this season, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all that turns out too. I do wish him the best of luck because I love seeing him at the World Cup. Yeah, he was awesome for Ecuador, and I just wish that we could see maybe a little bit more. I'm sure we will come 2026.
Agreed. Copa America too. We can see that coming up soon. I'm sure that's something that's actually, I'm not going to spoil that. It's something I want to talk about later as well.
All right, perfect. Well, we will get back to that. Good teaser. The next one that I wanted to go to actually is south of the border in America to Tigres in Mexico. They brought in Diego Lainez on loan, as well as Nico Ibanez from Pachuca. Now, Carlos, I do not know Nico Ibanez very well because I can't see a ton of the Mexican League over the course of their seasons, but Nico Ibanez is a player that they brought in after he scored several goals for this last year, and they spent $10 million on him. That is like, the money that teams like Ajax and PSV and Red Bull Leipzig spend. So yeah, I was shocked to see how big that was. And then Diego Lainez is like, just the big prospect for Mexico. He hasn't quite worked out since he moved to Spain, so that's why he's coming back to Mexico on loan. But it's amazing the kind of money that Tigres is throwing out there because it's a Mexican club. You don't expect Mexican clubs to have as much money as your UEFA Champions League type clubs, but it's just crazy to me that they can spend this much money to play a Mexican league. And I'm sure this contract that Diego Lainez will be on, the loan that they have, they're still going to be paying a very high salary for him.
Yeah, they're throwing out crazy money. It is a really fun team to keep up with because of that, though, right? I guess winning a few titles and having a ton of fans and contracts and advertisements will do that for you, though. Believe it or not, I know a little bit randomly about Ibanez. Again, from having played FIFA way too much a few years ago. He was a guy that I actually came across when he was playing for Atlético San Luis in Mexico. Briefly signed under contract for Atlético Madrid, actually, believe it or not. I think he was technically an Atlético Madrid player for 2 years, but was out on loan back at Atlético San Luis for those 2 years. So I guess for a time was under contract in Spain, technically in La Liga. That being said, spent all that time on loan and now ended up in Tigres. So I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't watch a ton of the Mexican League, but when I do, I always see Tigres kind of at the top of that. in the mix for a title. And I'm sure that conversation will continue to happen with these two signings. And that's not ignoring the fact that they also still have Gignac, who, despite his age, is putting up really, really good performances for them. So we'll have to see how that keeps going.
Yep.
And that money is how they got him in the first place too, by the way. I mean, it's not like that's not a new thing either if they're spending that kind of money, because they did get Gignac from the French league. And that was no easy pushover too. So they do have somewhat of a reputation for that now, more so than even maybe America, who's historically been like by far the biggest team in Mexico. So maybe we're starting to see the new powerhouse, right? New America. And maybe America is not the clear head. I've been using this word a lot, like from, I don't know, it's an international relations class word I heard a lot recently. The new hegemon, right? The new like king in the Mexican league might be Tigres. So fun league to keep up with though. And I wish there was easier ways for me to watch it regularly.
Yeah, I feel the same. It would be pretty cool. And there are a couple more Americans now for me to watch specifically, but yeah, either way, it is a very good and exciting league. For the next team, I do want to go back to England here. Now, Newcastle United have, a lot of history, but in the last, year or so, they have also come across all the money that there ever could be and ever will be. So it was kind of surprising when they actually only made 2 signings in this transfer window. They signed what is effectively a youth player from West Ham. I think that he'll be part of their first team, but Harrison Ashby is not a name that many people are going to be familiar with. The other one might be a little more familiar to people, Anthony Gordon from Everton, who was linked with everybody in the world before he actually made the move. Carlos, I don't know how much you've seen of this guy. I really don't think that Newcastle should have spent 40 million on him, but it's that English player tax, as a lot of people like to point out online. I feel like that's what did it for them.
It's possible. I really know nothing about this guy, other than the fact that he was picked up for 40 million by Newcastle. But I guess that's something you can do when you have that kind of money, James. Right? Why not? Might be pocket change for the people that run Newcastle right now. So I don't know. Maybe it works out for them. I fully have no clue what this guy could bring to their team because I know nothing about Anthony Gordon. I don't know. It's like it's like talking about like the USL Western Conference for me right now. I fully don't know what's going on over there, but I'm sure it's interesting and fun. So if they spent 40 million on him, I'm sure he's good enough for the Premier League. So who knows?
Well, if they waste 40 million, as you said, it's probably not a big deal. I think that they can just probably sneeze that out one random day. So, they'll be doing fine. Those. The next team is Celtic in Scotland. Now, my family is a Rangers family, but they did not do anywhere near as much business. So we will talk about Celtic. They sold one World Cup player in Croatia right back Josip Juranovic, who actually did start for them in many of the games over the course of the World Cup. And then they brought in another World Cup player in Alistair Johnston from Montreal in MLS. Now, Croatia did a lot better than Canada, even though they both started out in the same group. And Alistair Johnston was, he's a good player, but he seemed a little bit out of his depth in moments. He was also, though, one of the better players for Canada at the World Cup. So I think that it's an interesting replacement that you are letting Juranovic go and bringing in Johnston. I'll be interested to see how he does now that he's over there. So far, from what I've heard, pretty good reviews.
Yeah. I mean, again, they're spending money on him. I'm sure it's a good kind of player. Fully a player I know nothing about. I do remember seeing him play at the one game I went to. That wasn't Ecuador in the group stage, and it was Belgium versus Canada. So got a brief glimpse of him and what he can do. But again, Celtic is a really good club and knows what they're doing. So I'm sure he's a good signing as well. And Alistair Johnston is the name I guess we'll have to keep an eye on.
Exactly. The next team here is Manchester City. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone listening will have heard of Manchester City. They are obviously very good. They did not do a ton of business over this transfer window. They brought in a young Argentinian player, Maximo Perrone. But I think what was actually most notable for Manchester City in this transfer window, Carlos, was there was a falling out with one of their top players, Joao Cancelo, who I guess is just not in a good way with the manager Pep Guardiola, and he has been sent on loan to Bayern Munich. So pretty good place to land when you're just going out on loan, but also there was I think some stuff even on social media between him and the club. So it's just a bad situation there, and I don't know that all the ins and outs are going to come out. I don't know what they are here, but it's a rough person to try and cross, I guess, is your coach, but he has still landed on his feet, I guess.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not a bad place to end up after getting into a full-on argument with your team. So I'm sure he's doing all right. That being said, that is really awkward, and so he's kind of awkward. It's good news and good, I don't know, Twitter content. I always get secondhand embarrassment from this kind of thing, so it's really, really awkward for me to kind of read that and see that playing out live. But I guess that's just the benefits and the negatives of the modern social media age these days.
Yep, that is true. And Bayern Munich, to fill us out in this last segment for transfers, they also brought in Daley Blint from Ajax on a free transfer and Jan Sommer to replace their injured goalkeeper, Manuel Neuer. Manuel Neuer was injured in a skiing accident after Germany were knocked out of the World Cup. Carlos, I don't know if you saw this, but he's going to be out for several months because he was doing something that I feel like most professional players have in their contract, that you're not allowed to do this kind of thing. It's this would be why.
Yeah, I actually didn't see that, so that's really interesting. But as far as contract stuff like that, that is also something I've seen relatively recently, that I learned about randomly on Twitter and whatnot. That sucks. That's got to be such a weird situation for a club who puts in that kind of money and whatnot into a player, and to have that happen. Obviously, it sucks for the player, but I don't know. That must be such a really uncomfortable and awkward situation for the club. So that just sucks, James. That's really awkward.
Yeah. Well, Jan Sommer will benefit from that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that there was, one or two very mad club owners in Southern Germany. Anyway, that will do it now for the big transfers that I think we have to talk about. Carlos, we do have a little bit of extra news in our extra time segment here, and it is a little bit closer to home, related to the Rowdies, and then I guess, the national teams of both the U.S. and Ecuador, as you hinted at. So let's start with the first one here that unfortunately reports in the news indicate that Tampa Bay is out of the running for an NWSL team. So we had spoken previously about the fact that they might be in the running along with Boston and San Francisco. So the reports are now that there will be 3 expansion teams ultimately announced. And those 3 expansion teams are Boston and San Francisco and Utah. You will notice that Tampa is not in any of those places. Neither is St. Petersburg or Bradenton or Lakeland or anywhere else in Florida. We are, I don't think that we are going to, I guess the expansion fees are getting up to $50 million, if I'm not mistaken, $50 million in the NWSL. Maybe it's 500 million. I actually don't even remember now, but yeah, it's really unfortunate, Carlos, that we do not have the opportunity to build upon not only women's soccer in America, but also locally women's sports.
Yeah, no, it's very, I don't know. The whole thing was really weird to me because it was one report that we saw that Tampa Bay was even in the running at all, and that Stu Sternberg was kind of leading that charge. And after that, radio silence, right? There was nothing. There was no report. There was nothing from the team. There was nothing from the Rays, nothing from Stu Sternberg, literally to zero. Is that an indication of how serious we were taking that? Maybe. I don't know. It's kind of just speculative at this point. Maybe they were just trying to keep it behind the scenes and whatnot. But, I mean, if you look at San Francisco, I think it was, who was also pushing for an NWSL team. I'm pretty sure their ownership group has been very vocal about like this whole campaign to get a team over there and whatnot. Whereas obviously that just wasn't the case here. It's very unfortunate. I'm very upset about that. I'm very sad, especially given the fact that all the teams that were reported to be in the running, or all the cities that were reported to be running, got a team except Tampa Bay, right? So I think we fully just kind of struck out on that. And I don't know. I hope that a women's team is on the horizon. It's probably in the USL realm more than the NWSL realm at this point, which I think is totally fine. It is unfortunate though, because I feel like NWSL is kind of the spot right now for women's soccer. And as much as I love USL, I think it's going to take a little bit longer for the USL women's leagues to kind of gain that kind of same sort of traction, right? So NWSL would have been a great train to hop on, and unfortunately, again, fully speculating here, it seems like we just weren't taking it very seriously. But I'm just kind of talking as a fan who was keeping up on Twitter and frankly saw nothing on Twitter. It was, like I said, radio silence after that initial report. So it sucks. It is what it is, and I guess we're just gonna have to keep pushing for that and see. I mean, again, there's not much the fan can do other than keep clamoring and complaining and asking for a team. I don't know. I frankly don't know how serious Stu Sternberg would be about an NWSL team, given the whole situation about the Rays and moving stadiums and the whole 9 yard right now, right? So it's one of those things that we're just gonna have to wait and see again. But I hope it's a matter of a few years, and not like decades at this point. Although that's what it's starting to feel like.
Yeah. Carlos, along those lines, if you could take us into the next bit about the stadium news here and give us whatever update you have. I know that it might be also not too much or speculative, but there's something.
Yeah, no, speaking of, the stadium, I mean, this isn't the Rays podcast, but we have to mention the Rays because those are our baseball overlords that now own the Rowdies after the Bill Edwards era, right? All that happened a couple days ago, from my understanding, is that the city of St. Pete chose a group, the group that the Rays preferred. I believe it's called like the Himes group or the Hines group, something like that. I don't think it matters that much for the average fan, to redevelop the Trop site, quote unquote. What that means, I don't think anybody fully knows. The only thing that I can assume that means is that they won't be moving to Tampa, or at least that's what the initial signs are, right? If they're picking a group to redevelop on the Trop site, which I think is kind of sad. Moving away, quick tangent on the situation of the Rays right now, I think everybody would universally agree that a baseball team would do better in a nice spot somewhere in Tampa, somewhere outside of downtown Tampa. It'd just be a lot easier to get people to those games. That's a whole nother topic, and I'm sure the guys over at the Rays are probably talking about that. But as far as how that concerns the Rowdies, it doesn't, question mark, with the parentheses around it. Like, who really knows? From my understanding, there was no mention of the Rowdies. There was no mention of Al Lang Stadium. So as far as that goes, we're kind of just chilling at Al Lang for a little bit, right? No mention of a shared stadium, which, again, this is just my opinion, but I think a shared stadium is BS, and I would hate for that. It just never really works, especially a shared stadium with like an active baseball club and a baseball field. Like, that would be a nightmare, and it would just be terrible for the layout and the stands and the field, and the experience would just be totally different. I'm not opposed to moving stadiums. I love Al Lang, but if in the future like this great complex shows up in Tampa and it's just like perfect, like I don't really care. I think that's good for the future of the team. But this is my like little rant. I would hate to share a stadium with a baseball team, James. And I love the Rays. I just think it would be like a worst case scenario. So I'm glad that Rays news doesn't include the Rowdies. And I'm glad that Rays news is keeping us, at least for the time being, keeping us to ourselves at Al Lang Stadium. So thankful for that, right? No, maybe I'm
Yeah.
speaking just on my behalf. I don't want to put words in your mouth either.
No, I do agree with that, and I think that sharing a stadium with a baseball team would just be too difficult in my personal opinion. But that's neither here nor there for us, as you said. Luckily, at least for this time being, and the news that we have so far. Carlos, if you could take us into the next piece of news, which is very interesting for anyone who supports either, let's say, the Ecuadorian national team or the U.S. men's national team or the Mexican national team, Canada, Argentina, Brazil, all sorts of them.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really, really interesting development, kind of out of, I wouldn't say out of left field, but it's kind of been rumored and kind of been on the horizon. It's unfortunate for me personally because I had my whole plan in my head of after graduation and going to Ecuador for the Copa America, which we were supposed to host, and going to all the Ecuador games down there. That being said, the Copa America, I guess, is sort of coming to me. The United States is hosting the next Copa America. And not only will the United States be hosting it, there will also be 5 other CONCACAF teams present for that tournament. Presumably Mexico would be one of them, and the rest would be decided by Nations League results, if I'm not mistaken, James. So presumably your Jamaicas, your Costa Ricas, El Salvador has been on the come up, Honduras, who knows? Panama is always pretty good occasionally. So, I mean, there'll be good competition, and I'm sure it'll make for good matches. It'll bring the tournament number to a crisp 16 for the gold. Sorry, not Gold Cup, for the Copa America. And it's always going to be really fun when an Ecuador plays against Costa Rica, or an Ecuador plays against Mexico, or Mexico plays against Peru. Like, those matchups are the kind of matchups that I do enjoy because they don't happen as much. I mean, there's been some talk on Twitter from like my South American circles of Twitter of whether this kind of takes away from the fact that the Copa America is, like the South American tournament, right? The Gold Cup is the North American one and the Caribbean one, and so on and so forth with the Euros and African tournament. Like, it sort of takes away from that, maybe because more than a third of the tournament would be North American teams. But I don't know. Like, I think as a fan, it's not really all that bad. Other than if you were considering traveling for that and you're from South America, the travel costs go way up to get to the United States, right? And it's a lot more movement from city to city in the U.S. versus a city to city in Ecuador. Much different country sizes as well. So I don't know. This is probably too niche for the average fan. But thinking about the fans that are going to travel for this or want to travel for this in South America, it does significantly change up the landscape of what the Copa America is going to look like, for better or for worse. But I think if you're the neutral fan, the average fan who's just looking for a really, really fun tournament, I think it will be really entertaining, because I'm sure all the North American countries are going to go all in on this, maybe even more so, probably more so than the Gold Cup. It'll be fantastic for the United States, the United States national team with such a young team, for development to be, playing this big tournament against your Brazils, your Argentinas, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, and all the other really good teams that make up CONMEBOL. It'll be fantastic for Mexico's national team as well. It's just going to be really, really good for their development. And overall, it's going to make for a fun tournament. Putting all the personal, like, and travel things aside about getting to the actual games and whatnot, it will make for a really, really fun tournament. And, who knows, selfishly, maybe as an Ecuadorian supporter, maybe it gets the boys geared up for that 2026 World Cup, give them a taste of what it's like playing across the U.S. So not all that bad. And again, as a neutral fan, if you're that just looking for a good tournament, this is going to be really, really fun. So going to be exciting stuff. And I am really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think the good thing for teams from South America, as well as practice money as well. So as much as they can argue, I'm sure, with plenty of things, they cannot argue with the amount of money that they will get from back to the United States. If the 2016 Centenario version was any indicator, then it will be very, very good. So, Carlos, we also have one question from Twitter to go over here, and I will turn this over to you at Rowdies Wrap. With seemingly 2 number 1 goalkeepers, how will Neil decide who to start? It is a very interesting question because I assume that it'll come down to who's doing better. But what do you think? What is your take on this?
I'm gonna be honest. I think right now there is one number 1 goalkeeper. I think Connor Sparrow is the clear guy for me, just based off last season. Breno is again like the man, the myth, the legend for us, and Raiko is had a great season over in Madison. So not discounting from them, but we're talking about Sparrow as one of the best goalies in the league last year. Number 2, number 3, maybe number 4 at worst. I don't think we can debate that, and I feel like he has to be. I don't know. I'm not saying Breno and Rosarena aren't going to put up good competition with him during training. I just feel like off the bat, thinking about what he did last year, I feel like there can't be another number 1, or am I mistaken?
Well, I mean, if he's done that well, then he should obviously be able to carry over the form and probably win the spot again this year. It's hard to say when you're not obviously in training every day, but Phil Breno, we saw him a couple of times. Connor Sparrow, though, as you said, he does have a long track record in this league. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. I'm honestly I don't see Raiko Rosarena even being in that conversation right now, and that's unfortunate for me because I do like Raiko. But yeah, it'll come down to Breno and Sparrow, and at this point, I feel like I agree with you.
Yeah, I really like Breno, honestly. Like, he's a fantastic player and a really good goalie, and I'm sure he would do well as our starter more regularly. I really don't know how we could not start Sparrow. I feel like that was one of like the big signings of this offseason. So I can only imagine he is probably our number 1 guy right now. That being said, there's a long time till the opening game of the season, right? So who knows? Who knows what can happen? But I would put money on the fact that on Sparrow starting the first game of the season.
All right. Well, you heard it here first from RBLR Sports, and we'll say Carlos specifically, just in case it doesn't work out. But that will do it tonight, folks. Thank you for tuning in. And we will be back next week, obviously, with some more interesting stuff related to your favorite Tampa Bay Rowdies. So please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports. I am also on Twitter at RBLR James K. What about you, Carlos?
Yeah, I'm also on Twitter at CarlosTPA10. I've been complaining very regularly about my Georgetown Hoyas basketball team, specifically the men's basketball team. The women's basketball team is doing pretty well, actually, which is a really nice turnaround because they were struggling last year. Not to tangent too much on that. But yeah, I tweet about all my world of sports, my Georgetown Hoyas, all the Rowdies news, all the Bucks news, Rays news, a little bit of everything. Drop a follow at CarlosCPA10.
All right, and please like and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. Wherever you are, we are too. And for one more week in this off season, before the season does start for us, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.